Spoilers for Talamasca, The Secret Order, Episode 3. So I watched Talamasca, The Secret Order, Episode 3 a little later than usual, but I still wanted to talk about it because of how much I feel like it improved on the first two episodes. I enjoyed the way the Immortal Universe's first wholly original series began, but I also feel like the beginning left some things to be desired, namely a deeper explanation of what's going on, and a better understanding of where the story will be heading. Also some awkward scenes that made the show feel slightly underdeveloped in some areas. I'm happy to report that, despite a few initial misgivings, Talamaska Episode 3 continues to build on the more exciting elements the end of Episode 2 set up. As usual, this isn't going to be a play-by-play, just some spoiler-filled thoughts about the episode and storylines, characters, and all the other juicy tidbits in between. Now, first off, the structure of this episode was one of my favorite elements. Coming off the end of Episode 2, a traumatized guy confronts Helen about what happened to Kevis and Archie, who he found dead in an apartment last week. It turns out Kevis is a witch, and that she had information about the 752. What I'd initially thought was some kind of group is actually an object of power the Talamaska have been seeking for the last few decades. It's a legendary ledger of 1,000 years of research that was lost when their main branch in Amsterdam was set on fire in the 70s. This offers some really neat implications that, despite the power the Talamaska wields over immortals, their knowledge is limited by the loss of history they've suffered. It somewhat makes them less powerful, and Guy uses this to his advantage throughout the episode. Specifically, he seems to know where the 752 might be, considering the book Kevis was holding onto was important to Archie, but he doesn't tell Helen nor his handler, Olive, who, I gotta be honest, I don't really see the purpose of her character just yet. So far, she's someone who could be on Guy's side, but who also has her own reasons for being loyal to the organization. That's what I'm getting given her attempt to cover up that he was in the apartment with Kevis and Archie, despite the pursuit from a rather diligent officer. Well, anyway, Guy keeps information from Helen, a very realistic decision given the grisly deaths he'd borne witness to the night before. But he's also not the only one keeping secrets, and the way it goes about showing this serves to make Guy and Helen feel like opposing parallels to each other. Here's what I mean. After learning about the 752, Guy stumbles onto the coven of witches Kevis was part of and asks to mourn with them a bit. While they aren't too keen on letting an outsider in, one of them, Doris, takes a bit of pity on him. Specifically, she recognizes that he doesn't fully understand what he's gotten himself into with the Talamaska. She tells him about the dead agent from the very beginning of the show, and it's enough to get him to confront Helen, following her to a run-down Talamaska location. And it's here we get more background on her, and just how twisted the web of lies and deception really is. Helen was actually experimented on when she was a little girl, the Talamaska wondering if she had any supernatural powers. While she was eventually released from the testing house and later rose the ranks to become placed in charge of their New York branch, she wasn't alone there. She had someone else with her, I believe a sister, but I can't remember exactly, who stayed behind, except she doesn't tell Guy about this other girl. Instead, the audience learns about her through the flashbacks that play out. It's a neat case of dramatic irony for the audience to know what both characters know, despite that info not getting passed between them. It also makes me wonder if maybe we'll find out what happened to Helen's in-house companion in the coming weeks. But the real meat of Guy's story happens when Helen tells him the truth about Jasper and his hold over London's Talamaska branch. Given how much deception has been involved in his assignment, including no one telling him about the dead agent before him, it makes a lot of sense that Guy would blow up at her over it. Because not only does she want to send him into the lion's den long-term to try and cozy up to Jasper, but she also keeps trying to downplay his investigation into his mother, basically saying she betrayed the agency or whatever and trying to keep him from looking. She doesn't do herself any favors by admitting Helen isn't even her real name, and that Guy's involvement thus far means he can't go back to his old life, even though being able to leave had been an initial stipulation of their deal. Guy is angry, and he has every right to be, and I think Episode 3 did a good job building that anger, thus making the climax all the more satisfying. But before we get there, we need to talk about Jasper. First off, the idea of him turning people into feral vampires, basically vampiric zombies, is just so cool. I love the scene where we see him turn that poor guy, all for asking the wrong types of questions. He feels so undead, like something out of The Strain or the vampire Lewis and Claudia encountered in Interview with the Vampire Season 2 premiere. The fact Jasper has a group of them, just in general, doesn't bode too well for London. We saw in the two-part premiere he holds lots of control over them, but honestly, this whole thing feels like a disaster just waiting to happen. This is especially apparent when we find out that there's a third party after the 752, someone that doesn't appear to be affiliated affiliated with either Jasper or the Talamaska. This comes when Jasper is having a private conversation with Greg Owen, the front man, as it were, of the London house. It turns out that Jasper has some idea as to who killed the pair in the apartment and took the book. Of course, this is just a small moment in contrast to the scene's more prominent reveal. Greg has cancer, and Jasper is feeding him vampire blood to keep him alive. The reasoning behind this level of control is just so grounded in humanity. It makes the whole situation all the more sympathetic for Greg, who's just trying to live a little longer, but is now stuck under the powerful vampire's thumb. But what I really enjoyed in this episode was, of course, William Fichtner's performance as Jasper. It didn't feel like he got much screen time in the first 2 episodes, so when I'd heard from the grapevine his character was a selling point, I wasn't too sure. But this episode really gave him the spotlight in a powerful and really compelling way. Just everything about him, from his mannerisms to the line delivery, was complete perfection. He was intimidating because of how relaxed he was, how sure of himself he was, that nothing could top him. Because Jasper is a man on top of the world, and no better is that illustrated than in the final scene of episode 3. This is where our storylines converge. A frustrated guy enters the London Talamasca and decides to just start throwing hands with Jasper immediately. I mean, I expected this, right? Guy is fed up with everything the organization has been putting him through, so he's just gonna go scorched earth. What I didn't expect, though, was for Jasper to listen to everything he was saying. I kind of anticipated Guy to get stuck between a rock and a hard place, maybe have an encounter that made him realize the Talamaska were, for lack of a better term, the good guys. But that's not what happens. Instead, he's fully honest about the group's plans, tells Jasper all he wants is to find his mother, and says he'll help him get the 752. And honestly, I loved this turn of events. Every protagonist in the Immortal universe is a shade of gray, from Louis to Lestat to Rowan to Lasher, I guess. Again, I haven't seen Mayfair Witches Season 2. But still, all these characters aren't definitively good people. There's more to them than that. Guy showed instances of this by originally demanding money to join the Talamaska, but since then, he's been following their orders like a lapdog. But now, going to Jasper and allying with him despite the danger, it really makes him feel like a more fleshed out, well-rounded protagonist. Someone who's unwilling to be toyed with, but whose decisions might land him in over his head yet again. I'm not too sure where episode 4 is going to go now that Guy's basically made a deal with the devil in all but name. Olive was seen watching the London building from outside, but it's unclear if she knows what's going on inside. Oh, right, by the way, I'm one of those people who doesn't like looking at previews for next episodes if he can avoid it, especially on AMC, where it sometimes feels like the trailers give away a little too much. So I don't have any idea where this is going to go, or what Guy and Jasper are going to be up to in the next episode. But episode 3 did a really good job at grounding Talamaska, the Secret Order, into its own niche little corner of the Immortal universe. Not only do we get both vampire and witch stuff, even if the witch stuff was a bit lacking, but we also got more about the organization that makes it feel dynamic. I feel like the fact that Talamaska doesn't actually have its 1,000-year history, and that immortals like Jasper know about it, is going to play a key role in how events shape up in the back half of Season 1. I'm not sure if this means they're going to roll with Jasper trying to get a bigger slice of the pie, as it were, but I'm sure it'll have some big implications for the larger universe moving forward. And also, I guess as a side note, I do want to see more about the Talamaska's child experiments. I'm not sure if those are still ongoing, but given Guy's mind reader powers, I wouldn't be surprised if he was put through similar trials as a kid and forgot about them. And this isn't in the script, but I'm also curious about the church scene in episode 1 and how it might be connected to something like that. Maybe that mystery girl Helen was friends with actually has a particular connection to Guy, and maybe that connection is what makes him so important to her. Speculation for now, I know, but maybe something to consider as the series continues to develop. For now, though, I'm looking forward to seeing how Talamaska, the Secret Order, shapes up in the back half of the season, especially with regards to the 752 and what Jasper's real plans are, because there's no way it's as simple as the book's information when he has dozens of feral vampires locked away in his basement. I'll see you guys on hopefully Sunday for a review of episode 4, and to see just how much more danger Guy is going to find himself in after his perilous decision. If you'd like to see more, consider subscribing and tapping the bell for notifications. This has been Zeno, and I'll see you again in the space between spaces.